If you're new around here, I'm Katie Jones. I am a faith-based money coach helping young professionals learn excellent money management skills that are rooted in the gospel. And so one of those things is taxes. Jesus says to give to Caesar what is Caesar's. And although I don't really know much about taxes myself, since we typically have somebody do them for us, it is super important to be diligent about this process and prepare really well. So in this video, I want to give you some tips on how we are preparing for our taxes, at least how we are gathering up all the information and what we are gathering for our CPA to go and then prepare our taxes for us. And so hopefully this process will help you out in some way and shed some light on at least how we are going about in doing this. But I am curious to know whether you typically file your taxes yourself or if you have a CPA do them for you. Let me know in the comments, because I am definitely very curious how many of you actually do them yourselves. So like I said, we have somebody do our taxes for us. Before we were married, I actually did all of my own taxes. They were super simple. I just had a job. I didn't have any crazy investments, and then I didn't really have any crazy amounts of giving, and I didn't know anything about itemization. But once we got married, 3 months after our wedding, we bought our first rental property. 6 months after that, we bought another rental property. My husband brought along a lot of different investments himself. We were filing joint for the first time. I then started my business. There's a lot going on, and I honestly thought very briefly about doing our taxes and trying to figure them out. And then my husband was like, well, I have this guy who's been doing my taxes forever. Why don't we just continue using him? So I'm super thankful to pass along all of this to someone who actually knows what they're doing. It's definitely doable if you want to go and learn everything about filing your taxes and how to do it. But honestly, we are really appreciative of all the time and headaches that it saves us, because we're already both doing a lot, and honestly, I just don't really care to try to figure it out anymore. Again, it was super easy, very quick process before, but now it's just there's too much going on that I don't want to do it. Even though it is a little expensive to have a CPA do your taxes, I personally really appreciate this investment that we make, so that way we can free up all of our time. And again, just the heartache and headache that we would go through trying to figure it out. We file taxes in several different states, so just figuring out all the different things that go on in each state would just be too hard. So again, very thankful for our CPA. So another thing to note is that we actually file for an extension, which means that we don't actually file our taxes in April. We file them way later in the fall. Throughout the year now, and really I've already kind of done this work, but I put together all of the documents that our CPA will eventually need for filing our taxes. And the primary reason we actually file for the extension is part of the investments that my husband is a part of. We don't get all of that paperwork until later in the year, so we have to wait for those, and then once we get those in, we can file for our taxes. Here is kind of a quick list of the different kinds of documents that we're pulling together. This isn't an extensive list. I will link to a resource that has kind of a really extensive list of all the things that you might need for filing your taxes. But the ones I'm going to mention are more just what we typically gather together for ourselves. So definitely check out that resource. It's just something I Googled, and then you can get a whole list of different things that you might have for yourself. All the documents that you're going to want for your taxes are things about what kind of income you received that year, as well as anything you want to report that's tax deductible. So for example, here are a few of the things that we are putting into our filing system. So my husband works at a church and he receives a W-2, so we file with that. I'm self-employed, and so my income is a little bit crazier with real estate as well as my blog and coaching. And so there's different forms of 1099s that I collect to show the income that I have received for the year from those different endeavors. Also, we put together a whole list of the expenses from the business as well as for real estate, And also my accountant typically asks us for all of our bank statements just to go through and itemize everything really, really well. And so one thing that I'm actually working on this year for him is to kind of do that ahead of time. He's told me that he is happy to do it, but I know that it's probably a lot of work. We also have rental income from our rental properties. And so I really love that we have property managers who put together these owner statements. And so we actually get a 1099 from them. They also send over like a whole giant packet full of all the expenses for the year, as well as all the income. And so it's really neat and clean. And then I just send that whole thing over to our accountant. Our accountant also checks with us if we bought any new like appliances or anything for the properties, because we can get a deduction for like the depreciation. And the rental properties do have mortgages, so we send over the interest statements, and then we also send over all of the real estate tax documentation that we've kind of collected throughout the year. And then we also send over the 1099s that we get for interest that we received from our savings and investments. And then we also send over any HSA reimbursements that we got for the year. We also give to a lot of different places. So we send over all of our statements from our tithe to our church, as well as all of our giving to certain missionaries, ministries, nonprofits, and just different things along those lines. And so all these places that we're giving to typically send us a giving statement at the end of the year. And so that way our accountant, our CPA, can put together all of that for any kind of tax deductions that we can get from our giving. We also send over a whole statement of our mileage for our cars. And so we have this app that does a really great job of tracking all of our drives, and then we get to categorize what they were for. And so you can get deductions for anything that's related to your business. So I drive a lot for real estate, and so all of those drives can be tax deductible, as well as drives for charitable things, as well as medical runs. And so last year I had a lot of medical appointments for my knee surgery that I got, and so all of those drives to and from different appointments into the hospital and everything like that were all tax deductible. And we send our CPA the economic impact payments that we received, so the stimulus checks that we got. We don't have to pay taxes on those, but the government still wants to kind of keep track of all of that. So we actually put all of this information together into a Google Drive folder. It's really easy to put everything in there, categorize it with different folders, label it all really well, and then access it from different places. And I can also just send him a link so that way he can go in and download and receive all of those documents without necessarily going back with a bunch of emails. And so it's really easy, really simple. I try to keep everything really organized in the Google Drive folder for him so that it's not too complicated to find all of the documents. He's never complained, though I did send an email to him to see if there was anything I could do to improve my system. I also want to pause and take a moment to talk about how important it is to protect your personal information, especially when it is on a cloud, because those kinds of systems are more easily hackable from the bad guys who are trying to steal your identity. So I just want to share a couple tips on how we are keeping this information safe. Google Drive is generally really secure. They have a lot of different systems and encryptions to keep your information protected, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't hackable. And so it's really important that you keep your information very secure as possible. I actually change the password to my Google account regularly. I do it a few different times throughout the year, as well as use two-factor authentication. I also read online that you need to be really careful about what apps that you are giving permission to on your Google Drive. After I read this, I went on to see what apps I had connected to my Google Drive, and I realized that I had a lot that I really didn't need. And the last thing I recommend, not only for people who have cloud-based systems for their sensitive information, but anyone who uses the internet these days, I highly, highly recommend checking out and getting identity insurance. So that's it for our process of getting ready to file our taxes. Again, we are super thankful to have someone to do them and prepare them all for us, and then we just kind of send them off. I'm curious to know what you do. Do you typically file your own taxes and prepare them and do all of the work yourself? Or do you typically send them off to someone to do for you?